More Pennsylvanians than ever before cast ballots in Tuesday's election, shattering the state's previous record of 6.1 million presidential votes in 2016. The Associated Press estimated yesterday, or actually on Wednesday, that 6.29 million Pennsylvania voters participated in the election as part of the record surge in early absentee balloting, and by balloting on election day, voting on election day, we saw an unbelievable in-person look. Across the board, 52 of Pennsylvania's 67 counties saw voter turnout increases since the last presidential election 4 years ago. Among those with the highest increase from 2016 were, yes, Lancaster and York counties, trailing only slightly behind Montgomery County down in the Philadelphia area. Montgomery had 48,000 more votes in 2016 than in 2016. Lancaster had 32,400 more votes, and York County had 26,000 more votes than in 2016. And into that fray marches President Commissioner Julie Wheeler this morning, who was right in the center of that increase and having to deal with it. And good morning, Julie. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good morning, Gary. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm doing good.
Well, first of all, hats off to you and the other commissioners and all the volunteers and people who worked the polls this week. I know there were a couple little snafus there. I know this would be why to stand in line some long times there at one or two places. But I got to tell you, from what I could see and from what I've read about, this was a pretty seamless operation this week. I wanted you to talk about that this morning and what you saw from the inside this week having to work your way out.
Sure, happy to do that. And thanks for acknowledging the poll workers and the county employees, because at the end of the day, we could not have done what we did without these poll workers and the county employees. So thank you for recognizing those individuals.
Well, I got to tell you, at the poll that I voted at, I stood in line for an hour and a half, okay? And I often kid people. I said I wouldn't stand in line for an hour to see me, let alone. But voting is something different, and I think that it was a time to be very proud that so many people showed up and turned out, especially in this year where COVID has marked the year. But, I watched the people handle this in my local area, and I could only imagine it was duplicated throughout the county, where it was seamless. These people did a great job. They knew what they were doing. They were courteous. I can't say enough good about the whole process this time and how it was handled and how responsibly and gracious the people were in doing that, especially sitting there all day long with this increase of 26,000 right here in York County.
Yeah, and you touched on it. So voter turnout definitely was up from 2016 to 2018. Right now we're at 75% voter turnout. As you probably know, we're going to start today counting provisional ballots. We have a little over 5,300 provisional ballots, so that number is going to continue to increase. We do have military ballots that are still coming in, and we'll be counting those. So, yes, we definitely record turnout in York County, and it was great to see, in my mind, democracy in the making. And I got inspired by people at the polls. There were some polls that had some lines, and we're certainly digging into the root causes of what contributed to the lines, but part of it was just great voter turnout. I saw so much camaraderie. People were being cordial. I didn't see any voter intimidation. Nobody was arguing with one another. It was really inspiring to see that by the voters who were out at the polling locations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I came in the next day, and the very first thing I said to Mark on the show and the people on the show was, I felt really proud to be an American on Tuesday. Really, and not that I don't always, but I'm saying particularly proud because I watch people standing there with walkers and people talking with each other, people chatting, people kind of getting along, people quietly standing in line waiting to do their duty. I think that there's a lot to be happy about in this election in terms of what we saw. Yes, we have a great divide in the country. Yes, I would probably say a great divide even across Pennsylvania. But by the same token, we also saw people stepping up like we have never seen them before here in Pennsylvania in numbers that were great. And I think it's going to be incumbent upon our leaders to separate out what those numbers mean, and particularly in terms of cities versus the rural areas. And maybe you and I can talk about that later on. But the one area that we saw the other day that northeastern had a problem, and it was 4 hours. You jumped right in the middle of that and helped. But COVID had something to do with this, as I understand it. Also, tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, there's a couple underlying factors. And, I want to be really transparent with your voters listening out there. The long lines had nothing to do with the Northeastern School District. So
Right.
actually, Dr. Seidel and I are going to be releasing a joint statement today, but want to assure the voters this has nothing to do with Northeastern School District. We are very grateful and thankful that they opened their facility. But a couple things, we are doing our best to follow the social distancing and room capacity guidelines set forth by the Pennsylvania Department of Health. So we are limited in the number of people that can physically be in the room. The other high-level factors driving the lines are around this whole mail-in ballot and provisional ballot process. So we know we've been through the provisionals because they're all organized for counting today. 3% of the people that voted at Northeastern voted by provisional. In all likelihood, those were folks who did not receive their mail-in ballot. We know there's all kinds of challenges around the deadline for mail-in ballots that were driving folks having to show up because they didn't get their ballot in the mail. It's a very manual process for a provisional ballot. It takes time. Unfortunately, it's the process, and we do need to ensure checks and balances so that we're not double voting and double counting votes. And then there's the whole mail-in ballot process. We know that there were folks that requested a mail-in that for whatever reason changed their mind and wanted to vote in person. Certainly no issue with that. That's certainly well within their right to do that. But again, in that process, we have to spoil the ballot, have them sign a declaration. There's a couple pages in the poll book that have to be verified. So a lot of checks and balances. And unfortunately, they take time. Yeah. We did deploy some additional poll workers out there, and, more to come on that, but at a high level, those are some of the mitigating factors. But we're going to continue to deep dive into that and really figure out what the root causes are, because at the end of the day, we want this to be as seamless as it can for the voter out there.
Julie Wheeler, President Commissioner of the York County Commissioners, with us here on WSBA. Julie, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about very quickly, drop-in ballots versus the mail-in ballots, people who dropped them in the boxes and so forth. You could not do that at the election places. You had to go to specific places that were set up in the York County Elections Office, as opposed to the mail-in ballots. I think a lot of people got confused about that as they heard more stories in recent days about that. Can you separate that out for us a little bit?
Sure, happy to. So the current election code permits drop boxes where there's an election office. So for us, that's at our county administration building here downtown. So we had a drop box that was in the actual elections office up through the end of September. On October 1st, we moved that upstairs to make it a little bit easier for folks to come in, as we saw long lines forming down in our elections office. So anyone who received a mail-in and or absentee could physically drop that off at the drop box. We did have a couple times where we had a curbside drive-up the Sunday before Election Day. Lots of people driving by to drop their ballots off. We thank them for that. Again, we know there were some issues in the Postal Service. They were on overload in getting ballots out in the mail. So really, those ballots are treated no differently if they were dropped off versus receiving in the mail. They came in, the barcode was scanned into the system so that the voter would know that we received their ballot. And any ballot that we received up through and including the end of Election Day has been counted. Right. So really proud again of the team to do that. So all ballots were treated the same in that manner, whether they were dropped off or they came back in the mail to us.
One of the things that I think it's important for officials to do when they're carrying out their policies that are prescribed to them, in terms of an election especially, is not to say something that sounds political. I have nothing but admiration for Secretary of State Bukvar, who's trying to do the very same things you were doing on a state level, and yet there were some comments made that kind of maybe by guilt by association from your particular standpoint, were attached to you. Talk a little bit about that and what that was all about.
Yeah, it was a little disheartening, I'll be honest, and I'm glad you brought up the Northeastern School District, because there were some comments made at the state level blaming the school district for the election, and certainly that is not the opinion of the York County Board of Elections. So it is a little bit guilt by association when I'm quoted in an article where the Secretary is quoted in an article. So I really appreciate the opportunity, at least the voters listening today, to clear that up. And I will say, we still have a lot we can do around election reform. There's a lot of things that we have to get better and continue to improve. Certainly a new process called No Excuse Mail-in Voting, launching that in a presidential year. I don't know that was the best decision. I think York County did the best they could around that, and I know the other counties across the Commonwealth certainly did their best as well. So I think we, after all this is said and done, we really need to take to heart how we can improve the process here in Pennsylvania. I did want to comment, if I could. I've been watching the news on what's going on in Philadelphia, and I have to say, here in York County, we really did our best to be transparent with, in particular, pre-canvassing process. We started at 7 a.m. and at the fairgrounds. I'm happy to say we were done our pre-canvassing by 1 p.m. That was open to the media. That was open to poll watchers. We had both Republicans and Democrats there watching that process. We had representatives from candidates there. Both Biden and Trump campaigns had people there, and it was nothing like what you're seeing in Philadelphia. So it was very professional. People were complimentary that we provided so much transparency. Even back here in our office, as we were scanning in the ballots, we had a video feed so that people could watch. We took the press down so that they could see firsthand what was going on. So I'd like to just, again, share with your listeners that York County has been very transparent, and we are seeing nothing like what we're seeing in Philadelphia. So
and
nothing to hide here on our end.
Sure. We just had a ruling by the appellate court yesterday in Pennsylvania that guaranteed that Republican observers can watch the ballot counts in the state, and particularly might as well just put in Philadelphia there, because that's where they're really concerned about it, in Philadelphia, where there's been known to be some shenanigans from time to time. But what you're saying about what you did here in York County, here's the cautionary tale to everybody else. If you're not doing that, why not? I mean, if you're not doing everything you can to make, if I'm a person that's running the elections, I want to make sure that the people that are out there, all the voters, know that what I'm doing is totally above board, and there's not too much that I can do to make sure they know that in a time where we have some doubts about some of that stuff. I think that's a really important point. About 30 seconds left. Your final thoughts this morning.
If I could leave, folks, we're getting a lot of emails around Sharpies. We've been using Sharpies here in the county for the past 3 elections, so please don't be concerned. That is an approved method to cast your ballot, and your ballots were counted. There are other counties across the Commonwealth that are using that, so just to have folks rest easy that Sharpies were fine and no issues with that.
Mark asked me off air, does an in-person ballot get a receipt, or how do they know their vote's counted? And I guess the easy answer to that was, look at the, when you put yours in the computer there at the end, you have to stand there and wait, and then it says your vote's been counted. To me, that was my receipt. Am I correct on that?
That's it. Yeah, you're correct on that. Yep.
Yeah. So that's probably the easy answer right there. But I stood and the guy said, "Wait here now till you see." And he said, if something's wrong, it'll tell you. So that was the answer to that question. Julie, again, hats off to you and all the people that made the elections here in York County. I think a raving success. And I know there's always some things you want to do differently next time, but great job this time. Really appreciate your efforts, and hats off again to all of our volunteers around the county.
Thanks, Gary. Have a great day.
Take care. Julie Wheeler, President Commissioner of the York County Commissioners, right here on WSBA Morning News with Gary Sutton.